Welcome, everyone. This is Andres Restart, and tonight we're just hanging out, talking about apparently a new The Legend of Zelda remake rumor that's a little cryptic. It's possibly not about Zelda, it's possibly not even true, but I feel like this person has actually a fairly solid track record. And so we'll touch a little bit more on that today or tonight. And it's going to be a back and forth. It doesn't have to be about Zelda. It doesn't have to be about this rumor. So it's a Q&A, right? Just kind of like an opportunity for us to just kind of chat and have a back and forth. That's what I like about the Q&A. It's very flexible. It's fun. And I have a little bit more freedom in terms of what I can say and do. So, pretty much anything goes. But I'm going into it with maybe this new rumor being kind of like the focal point, and we'll go from there. So that is the general plan for the evening. I'm sorry that the podcast hasn't been so consistent lately. I've still made sure to do live streams. So those still have happened. We still had those long form live stream discussions. We still have the Q&As. In fact, I would argue we've done pretty much par. And I'm actually thinking maybe about doing a few more before the end of the year. And what's interesting about that is, well, I was looking at my calendar. And by my calendar, I mean just a calendar. I don't use like a customized calendar. I'm not that organized. But listen, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 1. So 12. Yes, 12 total days after starting tomorrow. Left before the end of the year. And I think we'll have a few different live streams before then. And maybe with some interesting topics. And of course, there's the beginning of the year. Like I don't really plan on taking any sort of extended breaks here. We may not have a normal podcast schedule. That's probably going to be the only sign of me taking a break. But you know, videos are still going to come out. And what's going to happen is I'm just going to be a little bit more flexible about when I go live. And I may go live with other people. I have a few ideas in mind. I'm actually really happy with how the debate went with me and Botox Games and Backlog Banter. I thought that was a really fun format, and so I want to try and do that more often. So there's gonna be more live streams. They're just not going to be necessarily Monday night because, well, next Monday night is Christmas, and if I did, then I envision people being very upset with me. Maybe not some of you watching, but at least people in my day-to-day life might be a bit offended that I'm live streaming on Christmas Day as opposed to, spending it with family or what have you, or even Christmas Eve for that matter. Maybe even Christmas the day after. I hope not. I hope on the 26th it's free game for me and I can just do what I do. We'll see. But anyways, yeah, live streams are coming. We're going to be talking about Nintendo tonight, and a lot of that's going to be tied to this recent Zelda Remake rumor. Of course, what you guys say and ask in the chat will steer the majority of the conversation. Now, I've already been kind of talking for a little while without checking in with the chat, but if you guys could let me know how everything looks and sounds, I hope it's okay. I would appreciate that. Let me know if it's all good. Actually, on that note, let's actually look at the chat and see what you guys have to say. So, first, just let me make sure. Okay, Boo Mini, you're saying everything looks and sounds good. Connor, you're saying everything sounds pretty good. Thank you. I appreciate that, guys. Thank you very much. I'm going to just start off from the top here. Johnny Danger asks, before we even went live, what is the rumor? Let's talk about it. So basically, the rumor stems from Nash Weedle, and he posted on Twitter yesterday. Let me see if I can share it with you. I don't have it up anymore. Actually, I might. No, I don't. But I can pull it up real quick. Yeah, here we go. It's nothing crazy. I mean, what's said is nothing. I'll just show you. I'll show you, and then we'll talk about it. Let's see. I have like 12 million things up. All right, here we go. Maybe if these are all part of the same, that makes it easier for me. Okay. I'll put that here. Sorry, I'm like managing everything now. Okay, here we go. All right, now I'll share it. Yeah, this is it. So very simple. Nash Weedle posted this yesterday at 3:02 p.m. CZR 2024. And what's interesting about this is that it's in the exact same format as the Dr. Sokon Toto tweets and that we've gone in the past that were hinting at some sort of Zelda news. Now, Dr. Sokon Toto is 2 for 2. Nash Weedle, there's maybe more debate on their credibility. But I mean, to be honest, like I haven't seen anything that they've been wrong on. There have been things they said that haven't been proven, but there's also been things they have said that have been proven or have lined up with things. And I've actually been encouraging people because I've made a few different videos related to different Nashville things over the last like few weeks, and I've been encouraging people to present any counter arguments or any proof or any like legitimate evidence with proper timestamps that would discredit this person. Because I've seen people say, "Oh, this person is not a credible leaker," blah blah blah, this and that, but I haven't seen any proof. I haven't seen any proper arguments. The times that I've actually seen anyone say anything to discredit them when they provide proofs like, oh, this person copied this information, and then I see the information, and the information that they posted that was like the original source for the information came out after Nashville talked about it. So there isn't any proof that I've seen. So if you have any, please, I encourage you. Literally, I'm on my Twitter here. So if you send me a message, I will see a notification. I will look at it. If there's any proof, I will look at it, but I haven't seen it. And instead, what I have seen is just a history of saying things that seem to line up with what's going on. So not too long ago, they were talking about Bandai Namco things and this progression with their closest with Nintendo. And not so long ago, we got the. I mean, I guess this partnership has existed, and what I sort of word this as is a little bit hard to say, but basically they have a dedicated studio that's named Bandai Namco Studio 2 and Studio S that's a dedicated Nintendo studio. So that speculation seems to have lined up with some things, and maybe it was just that, just speculation. But they also put out a Cryptic 3 not that long ago. Let me go back to their page. If we go back to, let's see, December 18th. So we go back to December 6th, you'll see something that's interesting. December 15th. It's already been a little bit while since the Game Awards. But give me a moment here. I'm just scrolling through. Let's see. They're very active, and they don't just post leaks. This is just their social media, right? So that I think that's a tall tale sign of like maybe a fake leaker versus a real one, because the fake ones tend to just use their social media platform as just for leaks, and this person just has a social media account that occasionally provides some things. And so here they said 3 the day before the Game Awards. Actually, if you just go there, it is right there, 3. And so what was that tip for? It was a very cryptic thing. Next day, the 3 Nintendo 64 games. They weren't at the Game Awards show, but it was the most interesting, intriguing announcement of the day from Nintendo. We've never seen them announce 3 N64 games like this outside of a direct ever, altogether. So it was a very interesting, unique announcement from Nintendo, and Nash Riddle very arguably was hinting at this. And then if we go way back, there was the Metroid Dread stuff. The Metroid Dread stuff, they told us that it was a 2D Metroid game. They gave us the release timing, the name, and so that was kind of like their big thing. But they even were talking about dev kits being out there before everyone else, and then shortly afterwards, everyone else, reputable sites, started reporting on dev kits. So there is a little bit of a trail of seeming to have good information on what's about to happen. Of course, It's not for sure because it could just be some lucky prediction, some cryptic things that are left ambiguous that you may be able to interpret in some ways. But I would say that I'm thinking that they actually know some things. That's my perspective. I don't know that for a fact, so this is speculation. Take it with a grain of salt. But anyways, they posted yesterday CZR 2024. That's in the exact same format of the Sircon Toto tweets. The first one that he did back in 2021 was right before a Nintendo Direct, and that was Z2 2022, which was hinting at a sequel to Breath of the Wild trailer in the E3 Direct of that year from Nintendo, the Summer Direct in June, and it had a 2022 release date at the end of that trailer. Of course, the game was delayed, but that was the initial plan for the game. And so Mr. Toto gave us a hint about that trailer. And then just this year, there was another tweet from Sircon Toto. Both posts have been deleted, but he posted saying what did he say? He said ZR 2023, and people took that to mean Zelda Remake or Zelda Reveal 2023. And so while we didn't get another remake or remaster announcement during that point, just a couple days later, we had the Nintendo investors meeting, and during that time, Nintendo announced or revealed a live-action Legend of Zelda movie, which is a pretty significant announcement. And so there's this history of Sircon Toto following this format of hinting at Zelda things. And so you look at what Nashville posted here, CZR 2024, it appears that he is emulating that style of hinting at something here with already an established track record of hinting at things that are going to happen. And these things have been related to Zelda. So then, assuming this is true, of course, you gotta take it with a grain of salt, but assuming this is true, what does CZR 2024 mean? And that's where things get fun. What could that mean? Am I jumping to the conclusion and saying that it's a Zelda remake rumor? Yeah, I mean, that's why we call it a rumor. There's room for interpretation there. It could be other things. But I feel that that's the most likely of the possibilities that this could be alluding to, because I think it would be odd if this is not a Zelda reference, because it is a Zelda reference. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a game. Could be a movie, because we did just had that one from Sircon Toto that seemed to have had to do with the movie. So maybe this is related to the movie. So some things that some people have suggested is the C could stand for cast, and it could be Zelda Reveal 2024. So maybe we get the reveal for the Zelda cast next year. I think this is interesting. But I guess one thought I have about it being related to a Zelda reveal, reveal of the cast for the Zelda movie, is that it feels a bit too early. Maybe they've really expedited things, but recently we've gotten interviews, and they haven't even started the movie yet. Like, they're still working on other things before they dive headfirst into this. Now, obviously, Miyamoto, they're putting things together, right? They're trying to line things up, but like filming hasn't happened yet. Like, we're not there. They may not have even. I don't know where they're at in terms of the hiring of the cast process, but the point I'm making here, especially when you look at how long it took to make the Mario movie, is we're likely years away before this thing comes out. So to expect a reveal of the Zelda movie cast next year feels a bit too soon for me. And on top of that, based off what kind of information we have gotten from Nash Weedle, I'm not sure that they would be privy to this kind of information. And so, yes, I'm very skeptical that that's what this is hinting at. I think this is more likely related to a Zelda game. And so we'll talk more about that throughout, but I'll come back to the chat here. I realized I just started diving in, and I couldn't stop. Sometimes they just go without even thinking. Oh, I am thinking, just not but I'm kind of, it's one track minded. that tunnel vision. Let's see here. Connor was asking, "Hi, Andres. How's it going, man? So I was watching both Nintendo Prime and Around the Clock videos, and it looks like that the Switch 2 games are now going to be expensive. Why?" I may have missed what some recent news that could be tied to that. So if I'm missing some context here, feel free to let me know. But I mean, I think I heard something about there was something Sony related that came up recently. But from what I understand, or at least from what I think, I am prepared for the major Nintendo releases next generation to start to cost $70. Not across the board. I think it's going to be a case by case basis, which is what Nintendo's on the record for saying, basically. But this conversation came up because of the pricing for Tears of the Kingdom, which is $70 USD. And prior to that, all major Nintendo games at most would cost $60, assuming it's not some sort of special bundle. And so what's interesting about this is that a lot of next generation games cost the $70, and with Tears of the Kingdom being on the Switch, not even being technically a next generation game costing that much, there's been this conversation that maybe this could be a new price point we see from Nintendo. And I mean, yeah, I think it is a new price point from Nintendo. I don't think it's the last time we've seen a $70 Nintendo game. I think more on the way, and it wouldn't be surprised if we see a few next year. But I don't think that means that Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, for example, a remake that's going to be on Switch, is going to be a $70 game. I don't think that means Another Code Recollection, a remaster of a Wii and 3DS game, is going to be a $70 game. But do I think that maybe the next 3D Mario that might be the most visually impressive Nintendo game we've ever seen, could that be $70? Yeah. Yeah, on Switch 2, running at 4K, 60 frames per second with all sorts of bells and whistles, and it just blows our socks off. Like, yeah, I think that's a prime candidate to be $70. Metroid Prime 4, a game that's was announced in 2017, and ignoring all the fluff that occurred or whatever it was leading up to the restart that was announced January 2019, it's still going to be over a 5-year development cycle, over half a decade. Metroid Prime 4 clearly is a significant investment from Nintendo. And so could that also be a $70 game, regardless of whether it's on Switch or Switch 2? I think it's possible. I would say Metroid Prime 4, it's a little bit less likely, though, because you look at things like, say, for example, Metroid Prime Remastered, where that's a $40 release on Switch, and visually, it's arguably the most impressive game on Switch. And even if you disagree that it's the most, you would be crazy to say this, and it's at least not in that conversation, one of them. And I bring it up because I think that does suggest how impressive it is as a remaster, and yet, even though it's arguably one of the most impressive remasters we've seen on the Switch, they released it for just $40. I think some of that has to do with the fact that, well, it's a remaster. That plays a role. But another thing that I think plays a role is just how popular the Metroid series is. So I don't know if Nintendo will feel comfortable with pricing Metroid Prime 4 at $70. I think they may feel they may be shooting themselves in the foot there. So that's a game that I think that will maybe just ends up being the default basic 60. But it's not certain. I would say that at least on Switch, it's got to be $60. Unless, they are just so confident with how people are going to feel about this game once it's shown off, and they have one heck of a marketing cycle that they just know that when Metroid Prime 4 is shown, it's basically like revealing a Tears of the Kingdom level kind of game, but in space. Like, if they feel that confident in terms of how people are going to be excited about this, that would be exciting because that would suggest some really special things for the game, right? But it also, maybe they do go for the 70, but I'm not sure that they're going to do that. 3D Mario, though, that could be Nintendo's next $70 game. So I think it's going to be a case by case basis. It's not going to be across the board. I don't think, like, for example, the next Mario Sports title is going to be $70, even if it's a Switch 2 exclusive. I think that more likely would be 60, maybe even 50, probably 60. So it's gonna depend. And so I think that's just the direction we're headed in. If you account for inflation, games should be more expensive, as frustrating as that may be. In these are expensive, hard times. And this may almost sound a bit ruthless of me, so forgive me. But, and, I'm not saying I make a lot of money. I don't, not right now. I mean, I've become a full-time content creator, but I'm at the bottom, right? I'm trying to build and grow. So I'm not rich either, right? I have to be conscientious about my purchases and expenditures, and hopefully over time things get better. But so I'm not trying to say this from a perspective of being like pompous or like, self-centered or what have you. Just fact of the matter is, video games are a luxury. So, it's not a cheap hobby. It's cheaper than, smoking cigarettes every day and drinking every day and going out to clubs every day and, doing things like that. But it's not cheap either. It's expensive. So yeah, games are going to get more expensive with the times, based off the economy, based off just how expensive they are to make. So it is what it is. On the flip side, though, there are a lot of games that you can find for cheap. I'm finally going to play Monster Hunter World, and I got that for less than $10 on eBay. And I actually was hanging out with my cousin yesterday morning, and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna start like playing Monster Hunter World." And we stopped by Dunkin' Donuts. I was like, "There's a GameStop." There's like, "Hey, what if you played it with me?" And we stopped by the GameStop, and he found Monster Hunter World for $8. And so that's a pretty good game. That's fairly new, and you can get it for cheap on other platforms, right? So you can play games for cheap depending on what you're looking for and how old it is and what platform. So there are ways to still play awesome games, for cheap. You just have to be looking in the right places. Not if you're a Nintendo fan, though. Not legally speaking. That's tough. Because those games always maintain their value. Anyways, moving on with the chat here. Let's see. Kieran, you've been playing Luigi's Mansion 3 and want to know which is your favorite level floor in LM3 if you played it. I did play Luigi's Mansion 3, and I actually 100% of the game. It was a little while ago at this point, a few years ago. I played it with a friend. I may be one of the best co-op experiences I've ever had, unless we're talking about Monster Hunter, because I love Monster Hunter. But outside of that, like, Luigi's Mansion 3 was a really good experience for me. There's a few other good co-op games I've played. But anyways, me thinking on my favorite level, that's tough. I haven't really thought of that too much, and my memory is a little fuzzy on it. I remember the pyramid stage with all the desert stuff. I remember there was like there was some sort of sea pirate level stage too. There was also a castle stage. They put in a lot of stuff there. There is a gym, right? There was a gym as well, with like a spa and stuff. So picking my favorite is a little tough. Man, I'm not sure. I don't know if I can say with certainty what's my favorite level. I think there was something especially impressive about the desert stage, the pyramid stage. There's a lot of good stuff in that game. I mean, there's a stage with I might be confusing with Luigi's Mansion 2. Am I? Luigi's Mansion 2, is Luigi's Mansion 2 the one with the chainsaw? No. There may have been a similar level. There's like a level that's all overgrown. There's some good levels. I wish I could give you a solid answer, but I think I would be being disingenuous with you because I can't pick one. But maybe that means I should revisit Luigi's Mansion 3 again and give it a second playthrough. That's what that might mean. AB James, the Minish Cap, Chris Granger, Oracle of Seasons and Ages. No question about it. So it looks like you guys are throwing in some of your bets for what this rumored Zelda remake is. We haven't touched on that yet. So if you didn't see the video today, or if you haven't seen anyone else talk about it, that is kind of what I'm leaning towards right now for what this is. Because ZR 2024, what does that C mean, right? Like, what does that C tie into? Capcom makes a lot. We have a few different Capcom games, the Minish Cap, Oracle of Ages and Seasons, and those are games that are available. I mean, Oracle of Ages and Seasons is on NSO. I think Minish Cap is also on NSO. Or not, actually. I don't know. Is Minish Cap on Nintendo Switch Online? The other day, I was confused because, like, I wasn't sure if Star Fox 2 was on Nintendo Switch Online, and it was. Yeah, looks like the Minish Cap is there. Yeah, I mean, it looks like it. Yeah, or it's at least supposed to come. It's there. Okay, cool. So these games are already available on Nintendo Switch Online. So is Ocarina of Time, for example, right? Like all these games that were kind of speculating on a remake, they all exist in their most basic form on Switch Online. But we're talking about like a brand new iteration of these games. Like think Link's Awakening style for these 2D Zelda games. And for Ocarina of Time, we're talking about a whole other beast. It's a whole other thing. Yeah, but I think the C could be related to Capcom. Like, that makes sense to me. A Capcom Zelda remake in 2024. That makes sense to me. But could the C be for something else? Like a collection Zelda remake? Maybe. I feel like Capcom Zelda remake makes more... It sounds better, right? It sounds like... It's like a phrase, right? Capcom Zelda remake, but a collection Zelda remake doesn't. If they said ZRC 2024, then I might think, oh, Zelda remake collection, like that. You know what I mean? Like that kind of makes a little bit more sense. Something that else that people have thrown out is maybe a classic Zelda remake. Now, to me, what's funny about that is that a remake of any Zelda game, I feel like, is a classic. So what do we define as classic? That would make it very, very open. But they're all options. But I'm definitely leaning in the Minish Cap, Oracle of Ages and Seasons games because they are the Capcom ones, and I think that fits. That feels like something Nash Weedle might have some inside knowledge on. You know, let's say there's another studio that's working on it. Maybe Mercury Steam is working on a Zelda remake, which would be kind of crazy, you know. Or maybe it's Grezzo, something like that. I am a little skeptical that they would have a lot of knowledge on who's making an Ocarina of Time remake, because I think that's gonna be a little bit more ambitious. But they could know. They had not too long ago, they talked about something related to Mario and them experimenting with that. So maybe they do have a knowledge on some major EPG projects. I guess part of it is that I want to be a little more grounded here, you know. Minish Cap, Oracle of Ages and Seasons, that makes more sense to come out in 2024, I would say, than the Ocarina of Time remake. And I want to make this clear. I've predicted the Ocarina of Time remake. I'm at that point where I'm calling it a prediction. I think it's going to come. I don't know if it's going to come. But I also think this is something that's going to be for Switch 2, this remake I'm talking about. And so what's the timing on that? Potentially it's a launch title, but you know, during our debate last week, I thought Backlog Banter brought up a good point that would Nintendo really want to release a remake to launch their system? Wouldn't they want something brand new? And I think that's probably correct. Sony may have come out with Demon Souls on PS5, but you know, Nintendo, I think, would do things a little differently. And so while I think a Zelda remake makes sense, I think maybe we wait on that a little bit. Maybe that's like a 2025 release. I think that makes sense. And if Nintendo is going to remake a game, I think Ocarina of Time makes a lot of sense. There's a few different interviews that we've talked about, different videos already, that seem to hint at this. And so that's not what this stream is about. I may touch more on that if you guys ask me, but Yeah, like if I had to guess, I would say if we're talking about a 2024 game, a Capcom Zelda remake is kind of what I think makes the most sense based off this cryptic tweet from Nashweedle here. Joy CJ, yes, talk of Zelda. It is here. It is happening. We are discussing Zelda. That is true. Good evening, Hydration Nation. Hello there, Adam Roan. Hello there, Nintendo's All Stars. AB James, at this point, something Zelda is pretty much a guarantee in 2024. What could it be? Nothing's guaranteed, but I feel that in most year, pretty much every year, we get something Zelda related. And so when we go through a year where we don't get something Zelda related, that's when it's odd. Those are the exceptions. 2022 was one of those exception years. Now, Tears of the Kingdom was slated for 2022 and was delayed to May. This is Nintendo's first $70 game. Something Nintendo felt was such a big release that can be the sole Zelda release during this period of time. But going into next year, there'll be something, right? Because usually we have something. You look at the Switch era, outside of 2022, they've always had some sort of Zelda release. Breath of the Wild in 2017, 2018 was Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, 2019 was Link's Awakening Remake, 2020 was Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, 2021 was Skyward Sword HD. You skip 2022 because of the delay. We got Tears of the Kingdom in 2023. So there's always been some kind of Zelda release. Now, I brought up some spinoffs. Those are also in the possibilities, but remakes and remasters, those also happen too. So, yeah, I think it's reasonable to expect a 3D Zelda remake and a 2D Zelda remake before the next brand new Zelda game, simply based off patterns, trajectories, history, and how Nintendo needs to do things to kind of carry us for the next few years as a Zelda, carry the Zelda fan base. So that's what makes sense to me. Yeah, and something I want to clarify on Ocarina of Time remake. Yes, it's technically a rumor, but I'm not talking about it from the rumor perspective. As I just said, it just makes sense for Nintendo to remake something. That's what that's what I tell Nintendo has done things. And they close a generation with a Zelda game. They have another Zelda release, a repurposed Zelda game early on to the next generation. And I'm specifically referring to 3D Zeldas here because they're kind of almost two different audiences, and they want to put something on there to bring over the Zelda fan base, excite them, something that showcases the system. But it's going to be years before the next major Zelda game. They've done this multiple times, and so I think they're going to do it again. And there was a trademark going back a while for Ocarina of Time, and now we have these recent interviews. I guess I am going to bring them up. I'll just briefly mention them, right? We had the Nintendo Dream magazine where Onuma thought it was interesting that we're talking about Rauru, and then he made I'm paraphrasing, but something to the effect of that he doesn't think a lot of people would know who Rauru is now. And they're talking about specifically the character, not the town. I understand there is Rauru Town in Zelda 2. We're talking about the character. That's what the interview was about. And so Onuma made reference to people not even really knowing the history of who Rauru is as a character, and which felt like maybe perhaps a subtle tease. And then we had this other interview where he straight up asked about an Ocarina of Time remake, to which he said no comment. He could have denied it, said we're not working on something like that. There's a number of ways he could have answered that, and he chose to not deny it. He chose to not do that. That was a choice, which leaves room for hope and optimism that something is happening, and he does have a history of teasing things. But everything I just said there, that's not rumor stuff, right? These are official interviews. There's a historical precedence for how Nintendo has handled their transitions from one generation to the other and what they've done with Zelda releases. There's the trademark. Like, those are all, none of that is a rumor, right? But it's those things that lead me in the direction of thinking, oh, okay, well, maybe they will remake Ocarina of Time. None of that's a rumor. There are rumors, right? There's the Zippo stuff, but I don't think Zippo's super reliable. I brought up Zippo in a video because, well, it was related. It came up after I was already talking about it. Other people were already talking about it. So it was just super relevant, which is the other reason why it was mentioned as a small detail in a video where there were several other details being discussed. And then there was the Circon Toto stuff, which I would put as a rumor. right? But I think that may have been just for the Zelda movie. So I don't really like referring to this Ocarina of Time remake thing as a rumor. Unless there's something that comes out that supports it as a rumor, then, we'll talk about that. But at where I stand right now, I look at it as more of like a prediction than a rumor. The Capcom Zelda games, that's what I would call a rumor. This is coming from Nashville. That I qualify as rumor. Now, maybe you want to construe the CZR 2024 as something related to the Ocarina of Time thing. In which case, maybe then you should call it a rumor. I guess it's all about perspective here, right? I'm not telling you how you should call it. I'm just kind of stating my perspective, and I feel like I've seen people on the internet, videos from other people where I kind of think that the information about this Ocarina of Time remake thing has been not appropriately conveyed. And so there are people that may only listen to some of these other places out there, some of these venues that have talked about this, and they just think it's a rumor from Zippo. And so they're not paying attention to the interviews from Anuma, right? They're not paying attention to the historical patterns, and they just think people are just kind of coming up with Ocarina of Time because it's exciting. No, there's more to it than that, which is why I've kind of gone this long, random tangent saying that I don't really think of it as a rumor, because I think there's a lot of people out there that are really misconstruing what this is about. So yeah. So moving on here, I'm gonna focus on some ads to catch up. My live chat just jumped, so I'm trying to find where I was at. Let's see here. Connor, so Andres, what plans do you think HAL Laboratory will do next for Robobot or a new Kirby spinoff game? I would say we didn't get a Kirby game this year, right? How often have we gone 2 years in a row without a Kirby game? I don't know what they're gonna do, because I feel like they need to follow up Forgotten Land, and I think next year is too soon for a Forgotten Land sequel. We have to wait. I would say we have to wait at least one more year before we get that. So maybe 2025 for a Forgotten Land sequel, or 2026. But that would be, a new 3D Kirby game, which would be amazing. Can they give us another 2D remaster, another 2D Kirby remaster? Maybe, but we got Return of the Dreamland Deluxe this year, didn't we? We did. Yeah, that was in February. They could skip a year next year. It's possible, but usually they have something, right? So I don't know what it is. I think it would be weird to release a new 2D Kirby game next year, unless it makes more sense for it to be new. But I think it would be weird if they release another 2D Kirby remaster literally 1 year after Return to Dreamland Deluxe. That would just be odd. And I think it's too soon for 3D Kirby. So maybe a new 2D Kirby game is like of those options, like that maybe is the most like realistic, outside of a Kirby spinoff. And when we're talking about Kirby spinoffs, there are all sorts of options. Now, I'll tell you this. This is just something I want. I don't know if it's going to happen, but if we're talking about remastering a Kirby game, what I think it makes the most sense if they absolutely need to get something Kirby related out next year, go back to Kirby's Air Ride from Nintendo GameCube, remaster that, add online play, maybe some new content. That I think would go over really well with the fan base. So, maybe they're working on something like that. That would be cool. Sakurai, there's been some speculation that Sakurai might be a bit more active now. I think it's probably for Smash Brothers, but there's some other options. Sakurai is responsible for Kirby's Air Ride. So that's just an idea. Pops Player 2. Andres, do you think that Ocarina of Time 3D takes away from the chance of a full Ocarina of Time remake at all? No. Nah, I don't. I kind of look at it in a way that it actually, in my mind, it strengthens the argument for an Ocarina of Time remake. Let me explain. So the reason why I would say that the existence of Ocarina of Time 3D strengthens the argument for an Ocarina of Time remake is because Ocarina of Time 3D is not a remake. it's a remaster. And I know understand there's a lot of confusion there. But basically a remaster is an enhancing of an already established work. A remake is building something from the ground up. And that line can get a little blurry because sometimes remasters have new content and remakes don't, and sometimes remasters don't have new content and remakes do. Hold on, my phone is buzzing. Okay. I'll have to call them back later. Anyway, so that's the first point there, right? It's a Ocarina of Time 3D is a remaster, not a remake. I don't think Nintendo would remaster a game twice over. And I realize when I say that, some people will say, well, what do you think of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD? I'll get to that. But to the point, with Ocarina of Time, since the game's already been remastered, if they're going to revisit the game, it makes sense to remake it instead. And that's kind of what I mean by it making more sense if they were to remake it. Now, you can maybe argue, what if they just take the Ocarina of Time 3D and just do a basic upscale, with some quality of life improvements, which would be a remaster. So remastering a remaster, it gets icky, in my opinion. But what else would they do? Like we talk about how it makes sense for Nintendo to go back to another 3D Zelda because they close out this generation with Tears of the Kingdom. It's probably going to be another 5 years or so before we get another brand new 3D Zelda game. And that's going to just a long time. They need something in between. So when we had Skyward Sword that came out in the last year of the Nintendo Wii, Nintendo followed up within the first year of Wii U, Wind Waker HD. Or, for example, Nintendo ended the DS generation with Spirit Tracks, and then within the first year of Nintendo 3DS, we had Ocarina of Time 3D. But that was almost 13 years ago, 12 and a half. And so sometime next year will be 13. And what's interesting, Ocarina of Time 3D came out 13 years after the original Ocarina of Time release, right? So once we get to 2024 or 2025, we're already talking about a larger gap between the current era and Ocarina of Time 3D versus the original game and Ocarina of Time 3D. So there's that history perspective as well. But also, going back to that Nintendo Dream magazine, it's one of the reasons why what Aonuma said there is so important, because he talks about how he doesn't think fans know who Rauru is anymore, like from Ocarina of Time. And so the reason that's important is because for those that would argue, oh, Nintendo, quote unquote, just made Ocarina of Time 3D, well, based off that interview, that already conveys that the producer of the Zelda series doesn't feel that way about Ocarina of Time. He doesn't feel it's a game that's modern that the current Zelda fan base would understand and know. Not at all. That interview suggests the opposite. And so that's what makes it even more interesting. I think it's a game that Nintendo would be willing to revisit, in part for that reason. And then the other thing to consider here, right? If Nintendo needs to repurpose some kind of Zelda game to help, maintain that Zelda hype over the next half decade or so, or they're just not going to release any 3D Zelda game, I think if we're talking about Nintendo revisiting something, we just got Skyward Sword HD. Wind Waker and Twilight Princess are actually, we had more recent entries of those on the Wii U. And so maybe those we just get straight ports of, right? Which would be sort of like a remastering. And again, I will get to that in a moment. Majora's Mask came out in 2015 and Ocarina of Time came out in 2013. So obviously, there's Ocarina of Time of the 5 3D Zeldas. It's the oldest in terms of having been repurposed. So if we're going to pick any of those 5, Ocarina of Time makes the most sense just from how old it is perspective. And when we account for the interviews, it still makes the most sense to me. So I don't think the existence of Ocarina of Time 3D takes away from the possibility of a remake. I think Nintendo's more likely to remaster something first before they remake it. But let me get to the Wind Waker and Twilight Princess thing, because I do think this does muddy up the waters a little bit. And it's also why maybe I have some skepticism for it. Now, Andy Robinson, the CEO of Video Games Chronicle, is one of the people who talked about this being there. There's others, like I'm pretty sure Jeff Grubb at one point has suggested this could be a thing. I wouldn't be shocked if Nate the Hate has done so as well. I'm not sure when he would have, so I don't want to make that assumption, but I feel like he has. Anyways, point is, I know there have been several people, even Emily Rogers. There's been multiple insiders that are considered to be reputable that have made mention of Twilight Princess and Wind Waker. And so the question is, what are they doing with those games? Because they were already remastered on Wii U. Are they remaking them? I don't think they're going to remake them. I think the idea would be just getting them over onto Switch because they already have been redone on Wii U. But it's already been so long since those releases that we're getting to the point that it feels almost like we've missed the window of, like, hey, there's these Wii U ports that are still that people just didn't play on Wii U, so they would love to play it on Switch. Like, they can obviously still do that. Like, if Nintendo does it, like, regardless of what it is, if it's a remaster, remake, or what have you, like, it's gonna sell well. And maybe that's the perspective. Maybe, we shouldn't hold ourselves to these rules where, oh, Nintendo would never remaster a remaster. Maybe it kind of depends. And so maybe they will just kind of take these games and rework them a bit. What does that mean exactly? Maybe 60 frames per second. Maybe they just kind of fine tune the content and UI elements because those games are customized for Wii U and they want to customize them for Switch. These are possibilities. Maybe they'll just be very basic remasterings or just, enhanced ports. That way it's not, people don't even call it a remaster, I guess. And that's how the rule isn't broken, but maybe the rule doesn't even need to exist. But if you're asking to ask me, do I think Wind Waker and Twilight Princess could be the games that Nintendo uses to kind of stall things for the Zelda fan base before the next 3D Zelda? I mean, it would just be kind of like a low effort thing, right? Like, I feel that Nintendo would think that they need something that is more new feeling, where it has some actual development effort behind it, to be what kind of ties us over in this long gap. Maybe Wind Waker and Twilight Princess ports can be a part of that equation alongside a 2D Zelda, maybe a 2D Zelda remake, maybe like a Capcom remake, as we're kind of talking about here. And then maybe also a Zelda spinoff. And those are like all that together over the next few years will be what tides us over until we're ready for that next open world 3D Zelda game. So that's possible. But anyways, yeah, I think Ocarina of Time 3D. It was a remaster. It's been a long time. They're gonna have to go back to the wheelhouse here and start remaking these Zelda games as opposed to just basic remasters. So I see we have a few super chats. Let's get to those. Metroid Fighter 90. Thank you for the super chat. What if the C stands for cast of the Zelda movie reveal? So I touched on this when we started the live stream. I think it's possible, but I'll basically iterate what I said earlier. I think that the odds of us getting a cast reveal next year feel a bit too soon for me because based off what we understand now, they're not even close to filming yet. So could they get that all together and start filming next year and maybe they announce the cast? I guess. But I also think that Nintendo wouldn't announce the cast until after they've done the filming. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Because, like, what happens if they have to do a change? Something happens during the filming. So there's that. I just think we're years away. I don't think this is something that we're going to see come out in 2025. Like, I think we're going to see this 2026, maybe 2027. And so having a cast revealed in 2024 just feels too soon. Also, I'm not sure Nashville would be privy to information about the movie. And I think that's maybe something else that's interesting to discuss. There is no one source out there that knows it all. And sometimes I find it interesting when you have some leakers out there that say, oh, there's no way that's true, or that's not correct, or how there's still just some people out there that have said things like this. And I think there are cases where someone with insider knowledge would be able to have enough perspective to say, oh, that's probably not true, based off what they know. But that would depend. And there's no scenario where everyone's going to know everything. I mean, we literally have an interview from the producer of the Zelda series that is on the record. Like, this is just a couple weeks ago, where he said he doesn't even know everything that goes on in Nintendo. He only knows about a small slice of things. And so if Eiji Anuba, one of the most important developers in the history of gaming, the producer for arguably the most critically acclaimed series in history, if they don't have a good working knowledge of everything going on in Nintendo and actually only have a small slice of the info, then how would someone who doesn't work at Nintendo that isn't as well connected would have a overall well-rounded knowledge of everything that's going on? And so I'm not saying that to say that, for example, Nashwita wouldn't know, but I'm just saying it to suggest that they might not know. No one's going to know everything. And anyone who says they do is lying. I don't know, unless maybe we're talking about like the president of Nintendo. Maybe even then. So just something I wanted to kind of put out there. I'm not sure they would be privy to that info, and it feels too soon. But it is an interesting observation. Like, I'm not saying it's a bad observation. It fits, especially with the most recent Circon Toto one, where it seems to have been tied to the movie. So maybe I'm off, right? Maybe the Zelda movie is further along than we realize, and maybe we do get a cast reveal next year. I'm not saying it can happen. I'm just saying I'm skeptical. Boomini, also with a super chat. Thank you very much for the super chat. Boomini says, crazy AF as fuck. Zelda rumors 2024. Yeah. That's it. That's what it is. The C is crazy. Zelda rumors 2024. Maybe it's all just a troll, an elaborate troll. That could happen, But also that happens. I don't think that's what this is. If they did do that, though, I think that would be... It would really take away from when they do post about these things, I guess. So I wouldn't like it. I would not like it. Causing a stir for no reason, So I doubt it. But, man, it's at least fun to talk about, right? All right, so moving on here. Hydration Nation, how we got confirmation of what ZR 2023 meant. I don't think we'll ever get hard confirmation. I think we have about as much confirmation as we're ever going to get. I mean, we're 10 days away from the new year. I think what it is Zelda movie. It's the Zelda reveal, a Zelda reveal in 2023. And what the Zelda reveal was Nintendo revealing that they are working on a live action Zelda movie. There was conversation. We had conversations that, okay, well, it could be about the movie, but maybe it's still about like a remaster remake. And with the Game Awards coming around, maybe Nintendo announces something then. The Game Awards have come around and nothing happened there related to anything Zelda. So I think that was kind of like the one possibility of it not being tied to the movie. But especially to account for the timing, how the movie announcement came shortly after this tweet was put out, I think it's pretty darn likely that that's what Dr. Circon Toto was referencing or hinting at. So it's not confirmation, right? If you want to like somehow hold out hope that it was tied to something else, I can't stop you. I would argue that you're probably wrong. Just based off what I explained. But, yeah, it's as close as confirmation as we're going to get. Technically, we don't have confirmation of what Z2 2022 was, but it was pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious that it was about the Breath of the Wild 2 trailer that had a 2022 release date at the end of it. Like that, it pretty much told us that Circon Toto was aware of the trailer was going to be in the direct. So, yeah. AB James, you don't see Prime 4 being $70. Yeah, I agree. It's probably not, but it's possible. Animal Crossing, Mario Kart. I don't know. I think I'm gonna need more information. Um, maybe an announcement of Nintendo's next system. Maybe it's to see some of their price points. If it ends up being the case that most of their like EPD full scale AAA games are $70, like that could be. But I don't want to jump to that conclusion quite yet. 3D Mario though feels like it because I feel like that's kind of like tippity top of the top in terms of like budget and development effort from Nintendo. Like Tears of the Kingdom levels. So and Metroid Prime 4 as well, but because of it being on Switch and because of notoriety of the brand, like with Metroid, like the IP strength, that's why I wouldn't be so convinced of it being 70. Let's see here. Ricky Lee Norton adds me. Hey, Andres, what's up? Excited about the Zelda thing, and it was also my birthday yesterday as well. How likely do you think a Link Between Worlds remaster is to happen? I hope it does. So, firstly, happy birthday. Hope it was a great one for you. And I'm doing relatively well. Thanks for asking. As for the A Link Between Worlds remaster, I think it's something that would, I think Nintendo could rework it fairly easily and it would look pretty good. It is a 3DS game, right? And so it has dual screen controls. And so there will be additional challenges to get it working well on Switch. So I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's not high up on my list of games that are likely to be remastered from Nintendo. That's just me telling what I think. I do feel I should say though that I'm not saying it can't be done. And it also feels weird to think that we would never get, Phantom Hourglass or Spirit Tracks or A Link Between Worlds on future platforms. Like I think Nintendo's got to come up with a way so we can revisit these games. And then that it's interesting because these are games that we don't have on Nintendo Switch Online either at all. And so we do have a lot of the other Zelda games on Nintendo Switch Online. We're talking about those getting remastered, remade, but the DS, 3DS ones, from that perspective, you could argue, well, would it make more sense to remaster, remake those since we can't get straight ports on NSO due to the format, due to the form factor? And so I think that's an argument to suggest that maybe A Link Between Worlds is more likely than perhaps I'm giving it credit for. I personally love the idea of like a Nintendo DS Classic and maybe also a 3DS Classic down the road. That would be really cool. Like imagine we got like a portable Nintendo DS. Maybe you can even plug it into your Switch dock and you can play the games upscaled in HD. And they're actually already at maybe at 720p in the handheld mode. And that would be cool. It would be a cool little handheld thing. Same thing for 3DS. Maybe that's too expensive for a little thing, but it would be fun. I would like to see something like that, or just some way. I think that the Nintendo DS and 3DS games need to be brought back. So yeah, I think we'll get to those. The other thing about Link Between Worlds is that it's not that old. I mean, it is old. Don't get me wrong. But if we're just looking at like new Zelda games, it's A Link Between Worlds came out what? It was a 3DS game. I'm trying to remember my timeline here. It came out after Ocarina of Time 3D, that's for sure. It was later I'm just looking at the year 2013. So it's already been 10 years. Most 3D Zelda games have been remastered less than 15 years after their initial release. or about 15 years seems to be like, so Majora's Mask came out the year 2000, Majora's Mask 3D came out 2015, Ocarina of Time came out 98, 2011, so it was 13 years. Wind Waker came out initially December 2002 and in Japan, and that came out on Wii U 2012. That's what, 10 years? Twilight Princess 2006 and then 2016, so that's 10 years, right? And then Skyward Sword came out 2011, 2021. So those are 3D Zeldas, though. Like, how one was not counting Link Between Worlds. We haven't seen too many 2D Zelda remasters. Like, we've seen a Link's Awakening remake, and that's it. Which is part of the reason why I think this rumor about some remakes for the Capcom Zelda games is interesting, because this is, okay, we're going to see some of the 2D Zelda games get repurposed. I think we should start to see some of those. And A Link Between Worlds, I think, should be in that conversation. So maybe, well, I think we'll eventually see it. I just not sure we'll see it soon. Oops, shared that. Moving on here. Having Hope. Did I pre-order the Noah and Mia amiibo? No. I haven't really been trying very hard to get Nintendo amiibos, even though they are really cool. Yeah, like I've rented some amiibos in stores. I'm like, oh, that looks really cool, but I also don't need it, so I don't buy it. And there's a little bit of that. I haven't been in the last few years. I haven't really been in much of a collector's mode, so I haven't been focusing on it because I wouldn't get the amiibo to use them in game, right? Like we're way past that point. It's actually interesting when you kind of think about that, right? That a lot of these amiibo come out and it's well after the game's released, to the point where people are done playing it already. So how many people are going to use the amiibo that takes so long to come out afterwards to actually use them in the games? Like, it's a small number of people. Most people buying amiibo, it's because they want it for collector's reasons, because it looks cool as a Nintendo fan, right? But yeah, I didn't pre-order them. I see here we have another super chat from Boo Mini. Thank you for the super chat. Could C be Christmas Zelda reveal for 2024, or do you think it's too soon? I think Nintendo is on break already. I don't think we should be expecting any major announcements from Nintendo. For a while. Like, I'm trying to see, did I even have any notifications for Nintendo recently? I mean, I did. Nintendo reposted Overwatch. They're just resharing info and posts about games that already exist. Like, I don't think there's going to be any more new announcements until January. Pretty much. There might be a couple small things. I just think that we're past that point. We're past that point of getting like major announcements from Nintendo. Most of their people are out on the holidays already. We're a week away from Christmas. We're less than a week away from Christmas. So no, I don't think there's gonna be a Christmas Zelda reveal. That would be it would be unprecedented. It's something like that has never happened before, to my recollection. We should not expect anything like that. I would say like a week into January, maybe start to expect announcements to pick up again from Nintendo. That doesn't mean we're going to get a Nintendo Direct announcement like January 8th. We could, but yeah, we're weeks out from that. So that I definitely don't think it's C for Christmas. No, it's a fun idea. It would be really nice to see something like that, but there's almost no way. Let's see here. AB James, a classic Zelda remake could be it as well, like the Ocarina of Time HD remake. Yeah, I mean, I would love. Listen, when, like, just so you understand my train of thought a little bit. Once I saw the CZR 2024 thing, yesterday, my brain was like, okay, so how is this related to Ocarina of Time remake? Like, I really wanted to kind of find a way to interpret it that would mean that But really, I personally feel that that would be me trying to stretch what I perceive, right? And I don't think that would be a good idea. Um, but let's put it to a poll though. Um, but my perspective is that if we're already talking about remakes, putting C in there for to represent classic, like I think Zelda games are already classics, right? So like classic, like that just feels like fluff. Um, if you're all remakes of Zelda games are classics, unless you mean like really old Zelda games, like Zelda 1 or 2, like that would be really cool. Um, and maybe that's what it could be, but I feel like interpreting it to mean classic Zelda remake and it being Ocarina of Time. Although if you look at it as since it's the first 3D Zelda game, it being classic, maybe that's what they're kind of hinting at here. So like as we're talking, but I'm almost like trying to find a way to talk myself into believing it's this. Um, I guess one other reason why I don't think that the C stands for Classic Zelda Remake, and maybe it does stand for Classic Zelda Remake, but if it is, I don't think I believe it. That would be a hint towards Ocarina of Time Remake, is because if Nash Weedle had some sort of insider tip that Ocarina of Time is getting remade, would they really choose to just say CZR 2024? Like, wouldn't they put a little bit more into it than that, or did they just want to really be that vague because they just didn't want to give out much information on what they might know? It's possible, but I just kind of wonder, right? Like, if you want to tease Ocarina of Time remake, why just say CZR, right? Like, why not put like OZR, like O for Ocarina, or like something else? So I kind of doubt that it's for that. Even though I believe I am still predicting that a remake of Ocarina of Time is going to happen. But let's put it to a poll because I think it's interesting. Do we think, or do you think, CZR stands for Classic Zelda Remake in 2024? I don't even know if I want to go into the Ocarina of Time direction. I'll just ask this first. Do you think CZR 2024 stands for Classics of the Remake in 2024? I don't, but it could be. All right, so I'm curious what you guys think. Okay. I was gonna say I love that. Well, you guys disagree with me. You can't. You're welcome to disagree with me. That's fine. I encourage dispute or healthy debate. This is a fun question. Thanks for asking this, Chris. This is a good question to ask. Let me see if I can put it on screen though. What was the timestamp? Of course, it won't show me here. Maybe if I make it a bigger thing. I see a still don't see a timestamp, so I'm gonna do that. Oh, okay, I can find it though. So after 906. Whoa, okay, that's how far down I am. Let's see here. Where is it? I can't find it. I can't find the. I wanted to put it on screen. Where is it? I am like now determined to find it. I could just read it out loud. It's fine. Somehow I missed it. I'll give you one more look. I'm gonna read it out loud because I have my YouTube chat up and I have the StreamYard chat up. So on the StreamYard chat, I can like show it. And so sometimes I like doing that. I'm just gonna read it out loud. So, Super Chris, Andres, if Nintendo's not returning to the formula used for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, what do you think the next Zelda game will be like? So this is a hypothetical. Because I do think that they will return to the formula Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom to an extent. I think that for those expecting that they're no longer going to do like open format, I think that they're going to continue with the open format. They're not going to go back to linear Zelda. I think there can be other linear Zelda elements incorporated, and there could be a better like marriage of the linear and open concepts together. But it's still going to be open. I still think we're gonna be able to do dungeons out of order to an extent. I still think there's gonna be a massive world that you can explore seamlessly. Like I think those elements are going to stay are now new Zelda staples. But I also expect that what they do with the next game is not going to feel like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom anymore. They're going to do something else. Like Tears of the Kingdom is a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild. The UI elements, a lot of mechanics, a lot of that's shared. And so things are going to be different. Maybe Link can't climb the way he can in Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, for example. They might do things a little bit differently with that. For that could be one way things change. Now, that's obviously a limitation. The way they bring it facilitates other ways to explore and platform. Like maybe we get a hook shot early on, and the hook shot can hook shot pretty much anywhere. And so that would be a different form of movement, right? At that point, it's almost like Zelda becomes like Spider-Man, which might be interesting actually, because so the Spider-Man gameplay is actually a pretty good gameplay for an open world structure. So that's a possibility. Of course, I know Nintendo's actually is not just going to straight copy Spider-Man. But I think the main point here is that I don't kind of expect it to be exactly the same. And I honestly, I would be actually a little disappointed if they took out climbing, but maybe they could limit it a little bit more. I mean, there's already a stamina wheel, so maybe I'm maybe more expecting a little bit of a fine tuning or adjustment. Maybe there's more areas that you can't climb on, but they still have climbing. Like you can still climb mountains and stuff, but there's just going to be more surface areas that you can't do. Kind of like when you're in shrines, you can't climb those areas. So maybe they'll just have more of that kind of stuff kind of mixed into the world. So there'll be a little bit more limitations in that way, potentially. That maybe, right? But I've talked about this before, but it's just a concept that's in my mind that does excite me. I love the idea of making the world feel even bigger. What do I mean by that, though? So, with better hardware, they can pull off some really crazy things. There's something about, like, Link starting out in the wilderness. I really like that trope. Waking up in the woods, like, that would be cool. Just you wake up and you're surrounded by nature. I like kind of like that idea where you're close to nature. So I don't think that needs to go away, but I actually think they can kind of further kind of embellish that concept. Like imagine a Hyrule where they can truly depict just how ancient it is. And when I say that, I mean so ancient. It's very ancient, but at the same time, there hasn't been any significant resets to humanity, civilization in a long time. So what you get to see is a very aged world. Um, And so imagine Link finding himself in a forest where the trees are as tall as the eyes can see, for example, and the 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 plant life is just larger than life. Like they kind of depict a very ancient, you know, deep, dense forest. Like that would be really exciting to kind of see. And so imagine a game where the wilderness is really kind of overtaking everything, right? Like Breath of the Wild, I mean, has wild in the name, and there's a big emphasis on kind of exploring the wild, but the plant life, the nature isn't that insane. It's I would say it's fairly tame. The weather can be kind of crazy, right? Some of the enemies can be kind of crazy. What you can do in the game is kind of crazy, but like the the natural parts of the game that are depicted are fairly normal, I would say, outside of weather. At least off the top of my head, I'm sure there's some sort of weird exception. I think that would be really cool though. If they were to convey like something more ancient like that. And I've thrown out the idea before that like what if you have these giant ancient forests and like, the land of Hyrule is just it's almost like completely um untouched by humanity. Like I really like that idea. Like just a whole bunch of natural areas. And now some people may think, oh, but we want towns, we want civilization. Like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, maybe there should have been more NPCs, more towns. And I agree. But maybe it can be a little bit of a mix. Like, what if the wilderness is so ancient, so overgrown that there's a lot of dangerous life forms out there? And so they're so dangerous that this environment is not safe for civilians. And so you do have cities, maybe even somewhat futuristic cities that are walled off from these natural environments. And so you kind of have a contrasted gameplay. You have these futuristic cities, and you got to find a way to get into them. And when you're in them, it's like these massive towns that are hustling and bustling with their own sort of cultures and side quests to do. And maybe there's even like dungeons that can be hidden in there. And there would still maybe be dungeons hidden in the that complete wild as well. But I kind of like the idea of having a contrast like that of two different ways of life that are very advanced in their own way. One being futuristic cities that are walled off from the rest of nature, and then the nature itself being untouched by civilization and what that becomes. And I think that would be a really cool idea. And obviously, this is just an idea, but I think it's an idea that Nintendo could better convey with better hardware. It's something they could not do on Switch. And so it's interesting to think about things in that way. And I think that's maybe a healthy way to kind of go about speculating on what they might do in the future. Because Breath of the Wild and the Tears of the Kingdom, they exist because the technology allowed it. And so on new hardware, what will that technology allow? What direction might the Zelda team want to go with technology that can facilitate? And so that's kind of why I kind of think in that direction. 60 frames per second, by the way. I'm saying it. I'm saying like I think the next 3D Zelda game will be 60 frames per second. We probably won't see it until years from now, but yeah, I think that. And it will still be open world and 4K. Upscaled. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, basically NVIDIA DLSS magic. Okay, this is another interesting question. AJ Thomas, if Ocarina of Time gets a remake, will it have 2 new endings? So I've actually, the concept of an Ocarina of Time remake, it's not a new concept, right? I think I go there's like a couple like 2 or 3 years ago I made a video talking about this, and I kind of looked at like Final Fantasy VII remake and kind of thought, okay, what if Nintendo were to do this for Ocarina of Time? And so I'm not saying they will. I'm not even saying I predict that, right? I think it might be a little bit more tame, but that doesn't mean there can't be some changes. And I do love the idea of Nintendo going back to Ocarina of Time and putting something in there that in some way alludes to the triple timeline split. You could argue that the game already alludes to 2 splits, right? Because you have the past and the future. But there's a third timeline split that has to do with Link failing in battle. So could there be something that they do that might hint at that in some way? I don't know what that would be. I don't know how they go about doing that, and still having Link win, because the idea is that Link doesn't win. Maybe that's just what happens. But I don't think they would want to give us a game where we don't win. Maybe they could incorporate like almost kind of like a Xenoblade Chronicles mechanic. So in the original Xenoblade Chronicles, Shulk could see into the future, and so when an imposing threat would be, right there about to happen, you see a few moments into the future, you see their attack, you see what it's going to do to you or your party, and you have a few moments to react to that. Like, what if they were to incorporate a new mechanic into Ocarina of Time, this remake, where something like that happens? And it's few and far between. I don't know. Maybe it only happens the one time in the end, but something like that where they could like show you, oh, you might die, right? That would be interesting. And then if they have something like that, there is kind of like a depiction of a timeline where you do fall in battle to Ganon. So that would be an interesting thing to do, and that could tie into gameplay, which I think Nintendo might be that would make Nintendo maybe consider it, but of course, this all comes down to just how much work they want to put into this remake, and I don't know if they're going to go that far. But for the sake of fun, let's say they do. Let's say they do make some significant gameplay changes to this remake. And we're getting to a point where there's something kind of more like the Resident Evil 4 remake we saw from Capcom, where it's almost like a reimagining, or like the Final Fantasy VII remake. Like if they go this far, which again I doubt, because the idea behind this would be to kind of tie this over until the next major Zelda game, not be its own project that would be as significant as a major Zelda game. So I just don't think they're going to put that level of effort into this, unless it can be totally outsourced. We do know that Monolith Soft has been hiring for Zelda. Maybe they're working on it. That would be crazy. But, which actually, given their history with Xenoblade, maybe there's something there. But anyway, assuming that they are going to go crazy with this, which I don't think they will, maybe they could even tackle the concept of playable Zelda. And what I mean is, like, they're on the Zelda team is aware that people want playable Zelda. And so what if something happens in the future where something like this happens? But like, I don't think that they want to make it so that when you start the game, you just choose, oh, are you going to be female Link or male Link? Like, no, I think Link, from a lore story perspective, is always going to be who he is. But I think that they can find ways to further incorporate Princess Zelda into the gameplay. And maybe there are moments where Zelda's playable. So, like, perhaps, what if they try this out in an Ocarina of Time remake, and they give us moments where you can play as Sheik, like brief moments, so we can kind of see some of the in-between things that Sheik did off screen. And that would be cool. That would be very fun to see. So, that's something that would be neat if they were to kind of mess around with that stuff. Since we're on the subject, I will say, before I move on, add a new dungeon. We need. I would want a new dungeon in an Ocarina of Time remake. At least when we get the light medallion, like, we kind of just given it. We don't really earn the light medallion from Rauru. I want a Temple of Time dungeon. Like, maybe make it like a trial, right? Like, maybe you just do it. It's very simple, right? Maybe it could even be almost linear. Maybe you can choose to go back to being a child if you want, but in order to actually enter the future, like that cutscene that happens when Link realizes his body is 7 years older, what happens is that he needs to maybe pass a trial, and this trial is a Temple of Time dungeon. And once he completes the trials, he shows that he is kind of he's shown that he's acquainted and acclimated to his new older body. Like, maybe that's the idea behind it. Rauru puts him up to the test to make sure he's ready for this, aged, tougher, scarier world of Hyrule in the future. I think it would honestly make a lot of sense. It would actually give more value to the Light Medallion because they just kind of hand it to us. I almost wonder if maybe they had a dungeon in mind, they cut it. Like, it would be cool to see them do something like that. And I think it would be very easy to fit into the game without changing the structure around too much. Moving on here. Netweed. Oh, I definitely take more of the same as Kirby's Florida for a sequel. Florida Forgotten Land for a sequel, just with a controllable camera this time. So yes, more like a traditional 3D Mario. That would be nice. Yeah, and on that note, the Ocarina of Time remake, I'd also want to have a controllable camera. Let's see. Moving on here. Hey, Brandon in the chat. Brandon with the solo raid. What's up, buddy? I see you talking about like some FPS stuff. I'm trying to see when you started talking about this. Is this in relation to me talking about a 60 FPS Zelda game? We did have that tech demo of Breath of the Wild running at 4K 60. But of course, that's Breath of the Wild, not a next-gen Zelda. Diozam, if there's any known is there any known cut content from Ocarina of Time? Maybe they can incorporate that if it turns out to be true. There is. There is known cut content. If you go back to, this is actually maybe a video I might do before the end of the year. I might kind of dive further into the subject of cut content from Ocarina of Time. But if you go back to, wasn't that long ago? There was, all right. So it's actually, it wasn't like it's a video that may have gone a little bit under the radar from me. But I put it out last Friday, and the video is just talking. I think the video had a title, something along the lines of like new Nintendo leak updates. And so there's a few different stories that relate to Nintendo leaks that we got updates on. And so I kind of made that as like it was a video with multiple stories. But one of the stories was about how we got footage of Luigi playable in Mario 64, and that we saw footage of that at Nintendo Space World 1995. At the time, it was called Famicom Space World 1995, and so it looks like we had a playable Mario 64 that had with Luigi in it, and they that was cut. And so it got me thinking about other cut things. And the other day, I actually saw from apparently another Nintendo Space World a playable build of Ocarina of Time. And when you take a look at that build, and I show some footage in the video, and I also link to the full field video where you can see that whole thing, where Link was using abilities that you don't have in Ocarina of Time. Like the medallions actually were different kind of spells. Like each medallion you collect, like light, fire, water, all that, turn into your own spells, and you can attack. You can use them kind of like Din's Fire, right? Like where you can send a shockwave around you, each based off a different element. But also you can incorporate that into your bow. And so they had that mechanic to an extent. You had the fire and ice arrows, the light arrows. You had the Din's Fire, but the medallions were the source of that, and there were more options. There's more variety there. And so that kind of was cut and simplified. That's just an example. There are other things that we know that were cut from Ocarina of Time, and I may do more research on that and kind of go into that in more detail and like certain things that might make sense in a remake. But yes, there is known cut content. Overture B5. Yes, CZR 2024 was a tweet from Nash Weedle. It's arguably a leaker that's providing information and hinting at something Zelda related next year. Yeah. So looking at the poll, 21 minutes ago, we got 51 votes in. I asked, do you think CZR 2024 stands for Classic Zelda Remake in 2024? 55% of you said yes. 45% of you said no. Can't we just pretend we're gonna get a Minish Cap a remake or a Oracle of Ages and Seasons remake, which, by the way, would still count as a classic Zelda remake. Like those would be great. I would be happy with those. But yes, obviously, I want an Ocarina of Time remake. I think most of us do. Because that's kind of like the big thing, right? And I'll say that Nintendo does need to go back to 2D Zelda. And I do and I'll also say that if we do get another 2D Zelda remake next year, I'll be happy. I'll be excited to play it. Minish Cap, Oracle of Ages and Seasons. I haven't even gotten to play Oracle of Ages and Seasons in full. Like I would love to get an opportunity to revisit that in a modern way. I would love to do that, and play it in full, as well as Minish Cap. But I do think it should be mentioned that the last 2D Zelda entry we got was Link's Awakening Remake, which is a remake. And I do think it'd be weird for Nintendo to follow up the next 2D entry with another remake. Back-to-back Zelda remakes without a new 2D Zelda game. And so, from that perspective, I am a little skeptical of it being a Capcom game, right? Like, even though the Capcom thing is kind of the first idea that I jumped to, you know, it's first idea that I latch onto that I think kind of makes sense to me, right? That feels conceivable. It's like I think that it's I'm at a loss for words here. I just think that it would be better. It might be safer to kind of keep our expectations in check here. I think that an Ocarina of Time remake like that, it would be it would be great to see, and I am maintaining my prediction, but I'm skeptical. I'm also skeptical of that coming out in 2020. Like I'm not like I think it makes sense for us to get a new 2D Zelda game in 2024. Like that to me, like a new 2D Zelda makes sense to come out before we get another 2D Zelda remake. But maybe this goes back to maybe we shouldn't be putting on too many rules here. Like, maybe Nintendo can do 2 Zelda remakes in a row and then just make a new 2D Zelda afterwards. But then it becomes such a long time since we get a new 2D Zelda. And so from that perspective, it's a little odd. But at the same time, if this is indeed not a Capcom Zelda remake and it's referencing a classic Zelda remake, and so that could still be 2D Zelda, but maybe it's 3D Zelda like Ocarina of Time. If that's what happens next year, well, obviously I'm predicting it, and I do acknowledge as a possibility of something we can even see next year. If Switch 2 is coming out, I think they got to launch that with 3D Mario and Metroid Prime 4, and it just feels like fitting in an Ocarina of Time remake with those feels like too much in a short amount of time. I think those are all big single-player adventure games. They need to be spread out. And so I'm also skeptical of thinking that the Ocarina of Time remake would come out next year. But I also think that it would be odd if we don't get anything Zelda next year. So I think something Zelda next year is probably coming because we usually get something Zelda. And we have this rumor. What does it mean? Is it classic Zelda remake? 59% of you, of the 56 votes we have, say yes, it does stand for classic Zelda remake. Actually, you know what? Let's put that. I'm ending the poll. I'm going to put a new poll centered around this concept. Because I'm stuck with this Capcom idea. What makes more sense next year? What makes more sense next year? Remake of Minish Cap of a 2D Zelda Capcom game, right? Because there's two different. Well, you could argue 3 Capcom Zelda games: Oracle of Ages and Seasons, the arguable 2, and then Minish Cap. 3D Zelda remake like Ocarina of Time. Okay. Oh, okay. Apparently that's not enough. Apparently that's I don't have enough. I don't have enough letters here. I'll just put OOT. OOT stands for Ocarina of Time, just so you guys know. Or maybe I should just, yeah. Okay. I'm curious what you guys think is more likely here. What makes more sense next year? Remake of 2D Zelda Capcom games, Zelda 3D Zelda remake like Ocarina of Time. All of you are just pouring in on 3D. Oh, God. Like, I'm not saying, I think we can get both, right? But it's just kind of like, what comes first? Like, how does Nintendo handle spacing these things out and when they go about them? Ali Z, Aragorn, do you think a Twilight Princess remake will come? I want one. I hope Nintendo eventually gives us something that looks like that tech demo from 2011. Yeah. What about not Brandon? Classic means different things to different people. It's a relative term. It absolutely is. It is a relative term. And we don't know what the C means. Like, you guys think it might mean classic. I'm not sure it does. But it could be. I'll be happy either way. I'd be happy either way. All right, let's see. I'm trying to. O'Reilly, what if they turned one of the 2D games into a 3D game? That would be ambitious. That would be very ambitious. And it just gets to the point where if you're going to be turning a 2D game into a 3D game, why aren't you just making a new game instead? You know? And so it just seems a little unlikely to me. You could make the argument that the original Legend of Zelda basically did get remade into a 3D game with Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild's big inspiration is the original Legend of Zelda. They even have like art that's kind of tied to that. It's supposed to relate to the initial Zelda. So that kind of experience, play the original Zelda and then play Breath of the Wild. Like, I think that's kind of the thinking there. Although I will say something about the original Zelda that I kind of like is you kind of jump in with minimal explanation. You don't fully understand what's going on. You just run around and you find dungeons. You just chance yourself into different crazy dungeons. Like with Breath of the Wild, there are 4 divine beasts, and you know what you're getting yourself into. It'll be neat to play a Zelda game where you're just exploring and you find something weird, and then that it turns into a dungeon. And so, going back to when Super Chris was talking about like how could the next Zeldas kind of differ, I would like the next Zelda game to kind of have a lot more variety and surprise. And so maybe even entertaining this idea of like, an overgrown wild ancient world. But the more you explore, you run into different things by chance. There are dungeons out there that you don't realize it's a dungeon until you're already in it. I want more variety there. And I think maybe that's kind of one of those linear Zelda tropes that could find themselves back in the modern Zelda. Because when we look at like Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword, they were starting to really experiment for how one could kind of define a dungeon. They sort of, they played around with some concepts and ideas where at first you weren't sure it was a dungeon. Like the dungeon that took place in Skyward Sword that was in the Sand Sea where you were on a boat, a pirate ship. Like that was different. And so it's interesting, right? Or like the city in the sky in Twilight Princess, like it is a dungeon, but it's also a city in the sky. It's almost like an area you explore. Or like Snow Peak Ruins, where you go up into a snow mountain and you find yourself in a mansion. And the mansion, almost like a castle, that is the dungeon. So I would love it if the next 3D Zelda, I'm talking about a new Zelda game though. I would love it if they were to go with the next 3 Zelda. They do something different with the dungeons where each one is just its own. It's just a unique experience. It's very clearly or rather, it's not so very clearly defined as what it is. But once you get into it and you're halfway through, like, oh, this is a dungeon. Like, that'll be more cool to me. So me thinking about the original Legend of Zelda, how you would just sometimes find yourself in an area like, oh, here I am. I opened a cave and it's a dungeon. Like I kind of hope that we see something more like that, more variety, and really kind of subverting our expectations more so in the next Zelda game. I think that would probably make a lot more Zelda fans very happy and would also facilitate a very high quality game. Maybe Zelda will take back those Game of the Year honors when that does come around. Wyatt Rosebrock. Andres, have you tried any of the 2D Metroid fan hacks? Several are very good. I don't. Yeah, I don't really mess around with fan hacks and stuff. I'm not saying I've never kind of looked into those things in the past, but uh, I think it's something I've in general shied away from, in part because I would like I'm not. It's definitely not something I would condone, right? Or um, get into, mainly because I would want to work with different companies, right? And Nintendo is very, very, very against those things. But I've seen cool things, right? Like there was the Metroid Samus Returns, right? Like that's not what was it? AM2R? Like AM2R was really cool. But I guess that's not a fan hack. That is just a fan remake. Yeah, I just haven't played them. But I've heard of different cool like modded iterations of Nintendo games. I know we've done some for Ocarina of Time and Mario 64. I haven't seen any for a 2D Metroid game, so it does kind of pique my curiosity a bit, but I haven't played them at all. Whoa, Netweed, this is a jalapeno take. You like the Water Temple in Tears of the Kingdom? What? I actually thought I liked the Water Temple as well. I don't know. I really enjoyed the waterworks under the lake. Like that felt more like almost more like the water dungeon than what happened in the sky. Uh, I wonder if they could just kind of. I mean, the thing is, it's an entire experience, right? And so, if you look at the whole thing collectively as the water dungeon, it becomes a little bit more interesting, I guess. I would say that the water temple, like for me, is okay. It might actually, it might be. I think it's the weakest of the four dungeons. If you don't account for what happens under the lake stuff is really cool. And so I kind of wish they went more in that direction for the water temple. And I almost kind of wish that what they did with what was the water temple, if they maybe changed that location and they made it more of a dungeon that was about space, because they had a lot of anti-gravity elements and stuff. Like it would have been cool if they had a dungeon that was extremely high into the sky, like so high into the sky that you no longer see sky, you see stars. Like that would have been cool to me. Yes, it goes back to my space dreams. Link going to space. Alizi Aragoni, what about an underwater game? I'll say that there was there is depictions of Zora tribes outside of the Zora we see in Tears of the King, like the lore of Tears of the Kingdom suggests that there are Zoras elsewhere, and so there does seem to be an implication that there is a greater aquatic world out there for Zoras to explore, and we can't go underwater in Tears of the Kingdom as much as we wanted to. So it would be. I don't think they'll ever like just do a straight up totally underwater game. Like it just wouldn't be a Zelda game at that point. But it's an interesting concept. It's one of the things I like about Majora's Mask actually, because you go into this area with the Zoras and you become Zora Link, and there's an extensive underwater area in that game with multiple areas to explore that have a lot of underwater stuff. And so Majora's Mask might have, Majora's Mask might have the most significant like underwater exploration of any Zelda game. Yeah, I think it does. Yep. Obviously, well, I mean, technically, the Wind Waker has a lot of stuff underwater. You're under the surface of the sea, technically, but it's not the same. Yeah. Anyway, I think pretty much near the end of tonight's stream, so I'm gonna end this poll. This one was only out for 10 minutes, but I think we're gonna keep this one short. But I may do another live stream later this week. Actually, I've been kind of thinking, what if I just did multiple live streams centered around a cool concept or idea, and that's kind of how we're going to close out the year. We're going to do multiple live streams. I think, who was it that was mentioning me hitting 35K? Was that Netweed? Was that you? If so, thank you. If it wasn't, it's okay. Thank you, whoever did. I'm not there yet. I got to get like 650 subscribers in like 12 days. I do want to hit 35K before the end of the year. That's been an internal goal. I haven't mentioned it publicly yet until now. So I'm not pacing for that right now. I mean, I'm not pacing for it, but that could change. With a couple, like, if I put out a couple videos that perform extremely well, that could change. Because I have paced about 1,000 subscribers, give or take, per month since Tears of the Kingdom came out. So the lead up to Tears of the Kingdom and shortly afterwards was like a big subscriber growth period. Then after that, things have slowed down for most creators. And I actually feel, with how much growth I've had in this lull period, if you want to call it that, it's been pretty good. I think I'm growing pretty well compared to my contemporaries. So I'm thankful for that. But it would be interesting if I can maintain that for December when the news cycle is dead. It would be fun. So we'll see. I got some fun things to talk about, but we'll see. Leave a like, guys. It'd be helpful. I'd appreciate it. Anyways, I think we'll call it a night. Well, I guess before we do, I'll read the results of the poll. I don't think I even read the results out loud. What makes more sense next year? 55% of you said 3D Zelda remake like Ocarina of Time. 45% of you said remake of 2D Zelda Capcom game. Man, why not both? We'll see. We'll see what they do. I maintain the Ocarina of Time remake as a prediction of mine. I'm just not sure about it happening next year. But we shall see. Anyways, everyone, thank you so much. I'll be seeing you soon. Take care. Bye.